Welcome to the Savvy Sauce, where we have practical chats for intentional living. I'm your host, Laura Duggar, and I'm so glad you're here. The principles of honesty and integrity that Sam Lehman founded his business on continue today over 55 years later at Sam Lehman Chevrolet Eureka. Owned and operated by the Birchie family, Sam Lehman in Eureka appreciates the support they've received from their customers all over Central Illinois and beyond. Visit them today at lehmangm.com. As I mentioned last time, my amazing guest, Emily Johnson, had so much goodness to share that we decided to split this episode into two parts. So I'm going to make sure that you first go back to part one before you listen to this episode today. But I'm looking forward now to continuing the chat about nutritional benefits and soul benefits and relational benefits in our health and the health in our children with my returning guest, Emily Johnson. Another topic that's health related is pursuing the opposite of isolation, which is relationships. So, Emily, what does friendship do to us or do to our children, even at hormonal levels and biophysical levels?
Yeah. So, when I was really sick, so I was really sick from a pretty young age on. And then I had kids really young. And so my kids had some health issues. I was sick. I felt so isolated. And I really was discouraged when people would speak about community. You have to be in community, right? And all the sermons and different things, books, these great books are like, you have to be in community. And I'm like, I don't know how to do that with where I'm at. I barely have capacity, right? To feed my children and get out of bed most days. How in the world am I supposed to go find community? And so I think that one, I always go back to for those people who do struggle and they are in a season where community is tough, right? I love the saying where the ideal lacks, grace abounds. And there's something beautiful that happens within that, right? So just to speak to that, because I feel like so many women I walk with have had seasons in their life for whether it's health related or their kids or just their, a mom home with 4 young kids and they just don't have capacity, or they're a single mom with 4 kids and they're working full time and they just don't have great capacity for community. I always want to plug that reminder in that there are seasons and God's grace always abounds beyond what is ideal. But then we take it to ideal, right? And we say, what does that actually look like? And we were made for community, right? We see all the fun videos of the little kids who are like the babies who are in the womb together, right? And you come out and they're still touching, right? We were made for connection. There's something really amazing that happens from a cellular level when we are hugged, right? You see some of those neurosciences of you need to hug for 6 seconds a day because it'll increase your endorphins, And so there's this beautiful thing. There is in certain science communities, there is a thing called biofield, right? And so it's kind of this idea that from 6 feet out from me in any direction, I kind of have this space, there's this spatial awareness that most of us have about 6 feet outside of our bodies. And when you kind of when somebody walks up behind you and you just know somebody's behind you, even though you haven't turned around or heard them necessarily, but there's just this awareness that they're there. And that is just, I think, so ingrained in who we are to be in community because we actually have been created not for isolation, but we've been created even with this biofield idea that we actually get to when people are around us, right? There's an energy that happens, right? When my kid is sick, there's this energy transfer that happens when my kiddo is sick and their energy is low, their overall body is just depleted, right? When I hold them and touch them, there's actually can be this cool transfer that happens from an electrical perspective that actually boosts them back up, right? Why do we hold babies skin on skin? Because there is that super crucial need for connection. One of my favorite studies I always refer to is a heart map study where they took babies and mom and they hooked mom and baby up to heart monitors. They had mom just kind of like go through her natural day, right? Really smiley, happy. And they kind of watch baby match mom's heartbeat completely, like in sync. And then they said, okay, mom, like start running, like don't change your facial expression or your tone, but start running through all the like scary things that you have going on, right? And all the worries and fears and all the things. And they watch mom's heart rate level start coming up, and then they watch baby's heart rate level start coming up, right? Like we were just designed from the womb to connect with people. And then they found those who they ran some studies on who had moms who were super depressed, right? They weren't in connection. They had whatever lives, whatever circumstances led to this, those kiddos didn't have the kind of intense one-on-one connection maybe that another kid did. And just watching that those kids had a harder time empathizing and being around other people, right? So like this idea that from the womb, we were designed to be connected to one another, that there is something ingrained in our soul, right? That the Lord put there that we deeply want community, but beyond community, we want to be known and seen and loved, right? And obviously the ultimate desire is to be known and seen and loved by God the Father. But at a lesser level, like we have been created to see that in one another and champion one another and encourage one another, right? And one of my favorite Bible stories is when Moses is holding his hands up, right? And as long as his arms are up, the Israelites are winning. But the minute his arm starts to fall, and then, you have Aaron and her have to come lift his arms up, and he sits down and they're the ones holding his arms. And I just think that is such a picture of when we have this vision of what God's called us to, and kind of whether that be a mom or a specific vocation or a specific ministry, when we have been called as women to do that. But yet there's these seasons where we're like, we're still trying really hard to do that, but I'm so wiped out and tired, right? You need those people around you who are going to go hold your arms up so that the battle doesn't, right? The battle's not going to stop whether you drop your arms or not. It's still going to keep going. And so when we look at that from just, again, like a metabolic perspective, we see that heart rates come down, right? We see someone super, super anxious in isolation. They go into a community where they feel seen and known and loved, and their body comes into this beautiful, restful, parasympathetic state, right? I would say a caveat to that is a little bit of picking your community well, because I think that the opposite is true. You go into a community where everyone's naggy and negative and discouraging, and you will walk away feeling gross and weary and tired, right? And it doesn't necessarily, good community is what, again, boosts your soul. But it actually, I had a client, was my favorite story, is we were having a hard time getting her blood sugar stable, and we were kind of trying all these things. And then she went and hung out with her girlfriend, and she was super tired that day. It had been a really, really stressful week. Goes and hangs out with her girlfriend outside, right? Letting the kids play at the park. And that's all she did. And her blood sugar, she took her blood sugar, and her blood sugar came perfectly back into balance, right? And just, we need community for every metabolic process, honestly.
That is incredible. And it is such a powerful truth, because I'd love to also talk about handling, managing, minimizing stress, which is important. But I think the enemy, our enemy, Satan, wants to convince us that if you're stressed, just power through. Whereas, like you said, God's inviting us into community with him and with others. He's created us to need both, and that is even more important. That trumps the stress and may even help us diminish the stress. So I know it's not helpful for us to hear you just need to lower your stress in your life, but
Right.
how
Just
can
do
we, yeah, how can we actually do that? And why is it beneficial?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit earlier about just kind of the idea of fight and flight. And I think one of the things that you see a lot in the world of holistic medicine is just looking at the nervous system. Because everything that we're kind of bringing in is like our brains are always hyper vigilant and always looking at, is this safe? Is this not safe? So you have somebody who is always stressed, always anxious, always running. your brain is kind of almost starting to get primed to think everything is dangerous, everything is a lion, everything I need to be afraid of, right? And so when we're constantly in that place, you never really, like, your sleep, just because you go to sleep, people are like, I sleep 6 hours a night. And I'm like, you're unconscious 6 hours of the night. Are you actually getting restored sleep? Or are you just running, and then you go to sleep and you're unconscious because your body's like, I'm exhausted, but is your mind actually calming down? Is your heart rate coming down, right? And so when you look at the overall, every process of the body, there's so much that is related to nervous system, right? Your breath, like, we're not thinking about our hearts beating right now or our lungs opening and closing, but our nervous system is, right? Our nervous system's always assessing and communicating. And so every sound we hear, every noise we come in contact with, every smell, light, right? All of it is having to be processed through that. And so when you look at that, I would say there's a lot of stress in life that we can't control. We're always looking, it's kind of like going on a bear hunt when they're like, we can't go under it, we can't go over it, we have to go through it. There's a lot of stress in life that we just have to plow through. I can't help my special needs kid. Like, I can't take that away, right? I can't help my marriage that's struggling. I can't necessarily I can't just like move around, the financial struggles or whatever. I can't always control everything, but I often go back to, but what can we control? Because when we kind of get into a place where we understand, I can't heal or be functionally healthy if I don't feel safe. So do I feel safe? Right. And again, I can't control everything, but I often can sit with Jesus and he will help me change the perspective of it. And so when we look at how stress is going to put a huge burden on every organ system. Stress is going to put a huge burden on our adrenals. Most of us know that kind of specifically, but it's going to put a huge stress on our nervous system. And so where we can minimize stress, where it is within our control, is always the best place to start, right? Again, sometimes simple things like unplugging your Wi-Fi will limit your metabolic stress. Eating protein, right? Eating good whole foods, not being dehydrated. Those are all things that are going to limit. Those are all most of the time within the stress that we can control, right? I can control being on my phone, which has crazy blue light right before I go to bed, which is going to like create a whole issue with my circadian rhythm. Like, I can control putting my phone away. I can control, how I breathe and how I get outside. And so minimizing stress, being in community with friends that are encouraging you and lifting you up, right? Like, those type of things are all things that we often can control at some level, in order to help minimize that stress that way. Because the point, I think, of the whole of health in general, right? We know 2 Corinthians 4 is my favorite, because it's like, we're all wasting away. And this body is going to waste away. So what is the point of this, right? And the point of it, I believe, is resilience to some degree. Do we understand the processes of our body? Are we actively working to create some resilience so things don't knock us out, right? You have some people, they'll get real sick, or they'll get into a car accident or something, and it's not major from the world's perspective, but metabolically, it is enough stress and trauma that their whole system shuts down, right? Like, the goal is that we are always renewing our spirit, but we're always working towards resiliency. And so the more we can minimize stress, the better resiliency every part of our body, from a nervous system perspective all the way down to a cellular perspective, is going to function better and have more resiliency. So when stress does come that we can't control, we can handle it better and it doesn't blow us over so quickly.
And now a brief message from our sponsor. Sam Lehman Chevrolet Eureka has been owned and operated by the Birchie family for over 25 years. A lot has changed in the car business since Sam and Steven's grandfather, Sam Lehman, opened his first Chevrolet dealership over 55 years ago. If you visit their dealership today, though, you'll find that not everything has changed. They still operate their dealership like their grandfather did, with honesty and integrity. Sam and Steven understand that you have many different choices in where you buy or service your vehicle. This is why they do everything they can to make the car buying process as easy and hassle-free as possible. They are thankful for the many lasting friendships that began with a simple, "Welcome to Sam Lehman's." Their customers keep coming back because they experience something different. I've known Sam and Steven and their wives my entire life, and I can vouch for their character and integrity, which makes it easy to highly recommend you check them out today. Your car buying process doesn't have to be something you dread, so come see for yourself at Sam Lehman Chevrolet in Eureka. Sam and Steven would love to see you, and they appreciate your business. Learn more at their website, lehmaneureka.com, or visit them on Facebook by searching for Sam Lehman Eureka. You can also call them at 309-467-2351. Thanks for your sponsorship. Okay, Emily, everything you've said so far is gold, but there's a huge piece of our health, which is nutrition. And as we're training our children on healthy nutrition, I just love to hear all your wisdom on this topic. So take it where you'd like.
Yeah. Okay. Nutrition is part of my story is actually nutrition was the thing that got me in the store that I had so many crazy health things. And I remember asking a doctor at one point, like, if I change my diet, will that help? And he was like, no, right? That's not going to help your seizures. That's not going to help your allergies. That's not going to help all the stress, right? And all the things that you have. And which, by the way, right, to kind of go back to the stress thing, the amount of times that people who are really, truly unhealthy are told it's just in your head, it's just stress, right, is crazy. So I feel like there's that level of like, do what you can to deal with the stress, but also you're not crazy. If something doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. And you're probably not just so stressed that, right, there's a level that is true that we can control, but then sometimes it has nothing to do with what you're doing. Just a little snippet in there, just because I think that can be so helpful for moms to hear. Sometimes it's okay. It's not all in your head. You're not making it up. But when we look at nutrition, when I started diving into it, I always joked that I was going to write a book that said like it started with paleo, right? Because we dove into this world of paleo and all of a sudden, all these symptoms that I had been told I was going to live with forever, all of a sudden started disappearing. And I was like, I don't need my inhaler anymore. I don't have seizures anymore. I'm sleeping better. I feel better. My puffiness is gone. Like all because I changed my diet. Like this, why in the world did no one tell me this sooner? Right. Which is crazy. So when you look at, again, nutrition and we're saying, what did God give us? And all the different levels of nutrition, you can look at macronutrients. So that's your protein, your carbohydrates, and your fat. Those, when we look at metabolic processes, those are like our big three that we want to get in every meal to kind of keep that fire burning, right? So from a metabolic perspective, you want metabolism is so huge in hormones, metabolism is huge in our weight and how we feel and just energy levels in general. And so when you're getting good protein, good carbs, good healthy fats, and obviously with all of these, right, there can be not so great proteins and not so great carbs, right? We're like, oh, I ate a cinnamon roll. I'm like, well, not probably your best carbohydrate, but so when I talk about these things, what I'm always meaning is God-made food, right? God food that is in its closest to full nature, right? And obviously we've altered food over the years, but to the best of our ability, what grows in the ground, what grows on the earth is what I'm talking about. Not necessarily processed food, even things like siete chips, right? Those things are like, yes, their ingredients are better, but still processed, right? Crackers, I don't care if they're gluten-free, they're still processed. And so when we talk about this, we're talking about just whole food, God food, right? And so it doesn't matter what you have, doesn't matter the health situations you have, kind of the background you're coming from. Everyone can, on a fundamental foundational level, look at their nutrition and say, food is the building block to my health. So when I give, again, we kind of talked a lot about nervous system and information. When I give the body good information through what I'm eating, it is going to help every cell of the body, right, function and thrive. And when we're getting those good nutrients in, you're going to get all those, you're looking at the big macros, but then we're looking at the micronutrients, so a lot of people talk about magnesium and calcium, right? And so all those are, selenium, vitamin D, right? Not necessarily synthetic form, but in so many of our foods. these nutrients are in abundance when you eat whole foods, right? And so I feel like for so many people, one of the best things, because food can also become this really, really, really scary topic. I always say if you want to tick somebody off, talk about their money and talk about what they're eating. Because everyone's like, now I'm mad. Now you're not my friend, right? How dare you talk about what I'm putting in my mouth? And I think there's a really interesting spiritual component to what we eat. We see all throughout Israelites, right? And just how they grumbled because their bellies were driving the train, right? Like God is literally giving them manna from heaven, his glory, like food, the angels' food is on the ground and they're like, I want to go back into captivity because they had leeks and watermelon, right? And it's like, this isn't a new thing. Food is really hard and can be really scary for people to talk about because we are really honestly controlled by our stomachs more than most of us would like to admit. And so when we look at food in general and nutrition, and we're being really honest with ourselves, right? We don't want to be in a place of fear. That's, I think, the biggest thing with all the holistic space, just like this health realm, is sometimes we trade like Western medicine for which we're afraid, like we're fearful in that. Like we have to take the antibiotic because we don't want to get, we don't want the strep throat to get out of control. But then we run to this holistic side and we're like, well, I don't want to take the antibiotic because I'm afraid my gut microbiome is going to be all a mess. I'm like, either side, you're still walking in fear. God's word tells us to not be afraid, right? This is the point of this is to empower us, to make us stand in awe of our creator who made all of this in such abundance for our good. He created all of our bodies, right? He created every mechanism, every cell. So of course he's going to give us the nutrition in the food that we eat in order to help support those natural functions of the body when we eat food that he's created, right? And so I say that with food because I think most people, we can dive down, right? Some people do need very specific diets for a short period of time to create better function in their body. Maybe they have an overgrowth of something and certain foods are not helping them kind of achieve that overall kind of thriving stability. But for most of us, my favorite thing when it comes to nutrition is to go back to Philippians 4, right? What is good? What is true? What is lovely? What is pure, right? And when we're focusing on that part of nutrition, we are just undone, right? How do you combat fear? You stand in awe. And when we can stand in awe of how God created an egg, right? Like we get to consume an egg, and an egg isn't just protein, fat, it also is vitamin D and selenium, right? And all these other macronutrients that we get to consume. And all of a sudden, right, we're taught to sit and pray and thank God for our food. And we're like, but what does that mean? We're just pausing and taking a deep breath, there is some really interesting health studies that have agreed with that, right? And they're like, you need to pause and breathe every time before you eat to better further digestion. But what are we actually doing? Are we teaching our children, like, look at this asparagus and this chicken breast that you get to eat? Do you understand how intentional our God is? That he made this food with such nutrient packed availability for you to be able to function right within your body. So when we look at every part of the body, every process of the body, we need good information, right? Good food to be able to come in to support that. And I think most people, when we use nutrition, like you don't need your multivitamins, you don't need some of these things. Like food is fundamental. I always say supplements should be supplemental. They're supplemental, getting you where you need to go, but nutrition is the foundation, the building block, the road, right? It's paving the way to health.
Okay, that is so well said. But then I'm even thinking, what are some examples of, you've talked about the egg and the chicken and asparagus. So will you share, maybe we'll start here, a way to get our kids involved? I know you've shared something that you do with the farmers market. Can you
Yeah.
tell us that story and then maybe give a few ideas for healthy snacks or meals?
Yeah. And I do like Instagram, my website. I feel like I have lots of information. And honestly, maybe I could even share with you some of the handouts that I give, and you could just put it and people are welcome to have them. Because I love getting kids involved. It depends on your kiddo's age, depends on how you want to approach this potentially, right? So when my kids were super little, we did a lot of rainbows, like, are we eating the rainbow? And so, we'd have like, I have a chart that we laminated, and, we'd be like, okay, here's your day. How, maybe you get a sticker at the end of the day or something if you ate the rainbow. And so that would be for younger kids. That's super fun. Sometimes for older kids, kind of that, I wouldn't even say like high school necessarily, but when they're kind of in the like end of elementary, maybe junior high-ish, depending on how they're wired and depending on parenting skills. I have some other ones that are like, if you eat protein, fat, and carb, now you can have maybe another choice that you would like, right? So for my daughter, that might look like you need to eat protein, carbs. Like let's say you're going to have protein, which is, again, I have some great handouts that are like, here's kind of a chunk of protein, right? So that might look like, steak or eggs or chicken or ground beef or bison patty, or I love Force of Nature. They make a really great ancestral blend, so you're getting like liver, heart, all that stuff, and it's ground in ground beef, so your kids don't necessarily know they're eating organ meats, but we'll do like little patties or something, right? Keep it simple. I feel like some of the most challenging thing with nutrition is people want to really overcomplicate it. And if you're just thinking protein, animal protein, you get one of those, right? You grab onto, like, maybe it's like, okay, now you need some salad, which is going to be, maybe some lots of good carbs because you're throwing in zucchini and cucumber and you're making a green salad, with a few nuts in it, and drizzling some olive oil on it. Homemade dressings, I think, are probably the most complicated thing that I get to, just because it's easier to leave out all the bad ingredients in homemade dressing. But there's some decent dressings out there, right? So that's your fat. So you do all that. And then I'm like, now if you want, like, maybe we'll have little snacks around the house that might be like some healthy chocolate versions, right? And it's like, now if you want to treat, you can, but you have to eat protein, carb, and fat first, right? That type of thing. So there's different checklists, different things that you can do. We, years ago when my kids were super little, we actually started a list, and I think Dr. Walls is the one I originally got this from, where she was like, you need to eat close to 300 different varieties within a year, right? Because again, kind of thinking back before refrigeration, before we were able to cart food places, we would have eaten a variety based on what was local to you that was growing in this season, right? Which meant we didn't eat the same thing every single week. We had a lot of variety. I think diversity within the diet is also so important. Again, I think it's further down the road, right? So if you're like just starting in this journey, just getting yourself to whole foods is a great place to start. If you're further along, the next thing we do is diversity. How many different foods? So our goal one year was to get 300 different varieties, which doesn't sound like a lot until you actually start writing it down. We're like, cucumbers, one. Okay, we eat a lot of cucumber, right? Okay, tomatoes. Okay, well, that's two, right? And then, so one of the things that we had done when they were little was we would go to the farmer's market. And we would kind of, I think our area, and I think a lot of areas are really increasing in kind of this idea of farmers markets over the last few years, which is really cool. When my kids were really little, we had one farmers market, and so we would go there once a week, and they had to pick out one new vegetable or fruit that they had never tried before, whatever it looked like, right? And if they could get it on a color of the rainbow, that was hard to consume, right? There's some colors of the rainbow, like purple, that's not always super easy to necessarily consume outside of grapes, or eggplant. And they're like, okay, what other purple options are there? And so if you could find purple cauliflower, right, then that was like the best thing, because you found a color and a new food maybe that we hadn't tried. Purple potatoes, right? If you could try, even if it was like a food that we already had, tried, but it was a different color of that food, right? Carrots, different things like that, that you could have different varieties of color, then that would count as well. So that was kind of one way that we, and it works outside of farmers markets, right? Just going to the grocery store, going to a different grocery store and looking, is there anything in the produce section that we haven't tried before? Can be a good place to start. Sometimes you have to like Google what in the world it is and how you, right? That was like we started off like, I remember Googling, how do you cut a mango? Like I did not grow up eating this way. And so everything was very new. I didn't know how to eat anything but iceberg lettuce or canned corn as a vegetable. um, and, learning. And so again, bite-sized pieces, right? Easy plus one. My kids do classical. We do a classical model for education. And I love one of the things they had done when they were little, in their writing was did this idea of easy plus one. And I feel like this always applies to almost everything in life, but nutrition is one of those where I'm like, don't get overwhelmed, because it took me and my family years to get to where we are. It wasn't like an overnight thing, right? It's been a 13-year journey for us, which sounds like a lot when you actually like look at what we eat and you're like, it took us 13 years to change out things. And it's always evolving because my kids are older. So now they're aware of things they weren't aware of when they were little. But easy plus one, right? What do we already have? Swap it out for something new. It doesn't have to be overwhelming.
I love that easy plus one. And I'm even thinking of all these fresh ideas of how I plan to incorporate this into our homeschool, because some of our daughters are interested
Yeah.
in going on for culinary arts and they love being in the kitchen. So I think that's a great way to involve them. By now, I hope you've checked out our updated website, thesavvysauce.com, so that you can have access to all the additional freebies we are offering, including all of our previous articles and all of our previous episodes, which now include transcriptions. You will be equipped to have your own practical chats for intentional living when you read all the recommended questions in the articles, or gain insight from expert guests in past episodes as you read through the transcriptions. Because many people have shared with us that they want to take notes on previous episodes, or maybe their spouse prefers to read our conversations rather than listen to them or watch them now that we're offering video rather than just audio. So we heard all of that, and we now have provided transcripts for all our episodes. Just visit thesavvysauce.com. All of this is conveniently located under the tab Show Notes on our website. Happy reading! But as you're talking about swaps, this is just kind of my personal journey this year. I feel like God doesn't always give me a word of the year, but this year I felt like He gave the word nourish, and even added to that as the year went on, of nourishing and flourishing. And food is a big piece of that, but also just tied in with all of this and helping our kids grow up in a healthy environment. What are some other product swaps that would be helpful for things that we're putting on our body, maybe makeup if they're older, or laundry detergent and different things like that?
Yeah, I would say I always feel like my encouragement is to start with what goes on your body. Right. Sometimes, and again, there's always grace. So sometimes it's like, just stop burning the candle in your house. That's creating actually more toxins. It smells nice. So anything that smells like fake fragrance is probably not going to be helpful to your system. But I would say that my next favorite is, what are we putting on our body? So that's shampoos, conditioner, deodorant, lotions, makeup, laundry detergent, right? Anything that would be like touching our skin. Then the next thing out of that would be, I think there's a lot of fascinating information that has surfaced the last 5 years of just the importance of undergarments and what it does to the endocrine system when we're not putting natural fibers on our skin. We're putting all these synthetic fibers. So again, it's not like you can financially, most of us go out and swap out everything. And sometimes I still, like my girlfriend and I were just talking, like, I kind of miss Tide. I miss the smell of Tide detergent. I'm like, I haven't used it for years, but I still like, there's something like emotional pride just from childhood that like just feels clean. Even though I know, right, that it's not. But when you look at all these different chemicals on the body. So again, when we talk about stress, when we talk about nourishing, right? Anything extra that goes on, your skin absorbs, right? We forget that it's the largest organ of our body, and it is absorbing all sorts of chemicals and endocrine disruptors and creating more stress on our bodies, right? Clogging our pores. When you think of that, the lymphatic system is a huge system within the body that will push toxins around and help drain the body of kind of this overburden of toxic waste. And one of the biggest places, the biggest places for lymphatic movement is around your armpits, right? And what do? We put on deodorant, which actually then doesn't allow our arms to sweat and to get that toxin out. And the next part is around the groin. And it's like, okay, what are you putting around the groin? Are you putting synthetic fibers? Are you putting plastics? Are you putting things, toxins within your laundry detergent, right? That is then creating a disruption, right? The body's trying to release toxins, and now you're either not letting it sweat it out, or you're actually putting other chemicals in those places where it's going to absorb even more and make that lymphatic system even more backed up. So I would say a home, like cleaning supplies and candles and fragrances, those are all really important. But again, if we're starting with absolutely ground zero, I tend to go, what's on your skin first? What's touching your skin? Moving away from that stuff is super helpful. There's so many different apps. We started with, the IW or the, oh my goodness, I totally blanked on what that is called. The app. Oh my goodness. Oh, well, it'll come back maybe.
It is. Say more about it. I wonder if one that I've started with, a girlfriend of mine, Rachel Allen, actually her husband was a previous guest on the Savvy Sauce, Chris Allen, but she's very healthy and has been on this health journey for a while. And she showed me the Yuka app, the Yuka, which is great. She said it's not perfect. It's just helpful. It doesn't tell you if there's seed oils in food, so that's a bummer. But with products, if I am out shopping and I scan a few, it'll tell which is a better option.
Yeah, so that's a good one. IWG was the one that we originally started with, 10 years ago. And so that can be helpful when you just don't know, right? And you're in the store and you're like, I always buy this, and you kind of scan it and see what pops up. But that can be helpful. But I would say in general, again, looking at just reading ingredients, if you can understand ingredients and you're like, oh, this is beef tallow and, some essential oils and baking soda, right? Like, that's probably okay, versus the I don't know these ingredients. These are a long list of ingredients and I have no idea how to even pronounce them. So apps can be helpful. My preference is to encourage us as much as we can, right, to get away from electronics. And I think that sometimes it's hard when we're so scanning apps can be helpful, but also just reading ingredients can be helpful.
That's great. And again, just to kind of jumpstart us, do you have any favorite brands to recommend? Or even on your website, is there a place where you talk about swaps that we can link to?
Yeah, so on my website, and I'm constantly trying to update this as best I can, because again, a lot of this started for me almost 13 years ago. And so much has changed in 13 years. So I'm constantly trying to stay up with the new things, because we all know that anytime something becomes a buzzword, all of a sudden, all these companies jump out. Where in the world did they, and are they good?
Mhm.
And so being able to kind of, obviously now there's so much more happening so quickly. So on my website, I have a blog post that's just like getting started. And that I just keep trying to add to as I find books or information or podcasts that I think are helpful in this realm. It kind of breaks it down. Do you want to read a book? Do you want to listen to a podcast? Do you want to, me and some of my girlfriends did like a whole series on different parts of the body and just different things. And that's all linked there. So just whether you want to watch something, read something, listen to something, there's lots of information there. And then on my website, I have lots of different, my favorite things. And those are just some of my favorite products. There's great products out there. Just because it's not on there doesn't mean it's not great. But there's a lot of products that I really used to love, and that they don't make the products either the same that they used to, or they have disbanded over the years, right? And so just because it's not on there doesn't mean it's still not a great product, but I try to update that. If I find something I really love, I will try to update those two spots on my website.
We'll definitely want to link to that in the show notes, but can you give us your website name and just tell more about in general all the work that you do and what you have to offer if we want to follow up after this conversation?
Yeah, so my website is mygracioushealing.com. Between my website, I have an email list, but then I also do a lot on social media, Instagram specifically. So my handle over there is gracious.healing. Try just to give lots of tips and lots of trying to reclaim some of that social media space to let it be more encouraging and not fear-based. But hopefully try to kind of clue people in on just things that I'm learning and things I see in my clients. I do have a one-on-one practice called Gracious Healing, and we just work bio individual with, I started off with children, and then I've obviously moved to moms, and now I'm kind of treating most whole families. But I love working with families just because it's sometimes easier because you already know so much history and everything. But our goal in doing one-on-one nutrition clients is we're looking at lifestyle, history, symptoms, we're looking at personality, we're looking at all the ways God created you and where is there dysfunction on labs, or again, we're not thriving, right? Someone might be tired, but what does that mean? Is it a soul issue, a heart issue, a mental issue? Is it you're not getting enough rest? Do you need more nutrition? That kind of stuff. So we look at all of that and really holistically, and then we break down a road plan. How are we going to get you there? You're in the driver's seat. I'm just trying to help you navigate. What nutrition might you need? What kind of steps might you need in terms of supplementation, diet recommendations, lifestyle pieces? And we kind of address all of that with kind of a game plan of follow-ups and what that looks like. My goal is for people to not need me forever. So our goal is to help as much as clients want to be discipled and learn all of this so that then they can, get to where they feel they're truly thriving, and then they can run off, into the world that God has for them.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And I will definitely link to that in the show notes. And I just have a couple more questions for you because I want to make sure, even as you talk about meeting with your clients, and it's very bio individual. So maybe there's not an answer to this, but is there anything in general, any other health principles or even supplements that you do see, generally speaking, this would be beneficial to everyone? Anything that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, so I'd say at this point, the only two supplement companies that I feel like can be pretty helpful for most people. One is called Core Formulas. They are just kind of basic, like nothing they're doing is crazy detox, nothing they're doing is like killing anything. They're just really supporting the body from a nutritional standpoint. So you're thinking drainage, gut support, and vitamin support. So they're a pretty basic company. I feel like most people can kind of look on their website, determine if that's something that would be helpful for them. And then the other one would be Body Bio. So Body Bio is a great company that focuses specifically on cellular health. And so you're going to have electrolytes, you're going to have some good kind of fatty acids, right? When we look at the cell, we need 4-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3. A lot of us focus on omega-3 because there just aren't great sources for omega-6. And so they make some really great companies that really look at the cellular level, the mitochondrial level, their products are really based on that. You're not going to have, again, crazy detox supplements. So most people can tolerate, at least to a small degree. I always say it's individual. You should always kind of look at who you are, what you have, what your goals are. Because again, sometimes I think we hear things and we're like, oh, this is the roadmap. I need to detox. I need to do a liver blast. I need to do all these things. And that may not be true, right? And so the ability in this day and age is to be able to chew and spit, right? Like what information is helpful, spit out what's not, and then maybe tuck away in my brain what might be helpful down the road. Yeah, I think those companies are the only companies I ever feel confident being like most people would benefit from kind of playing around with those products. Yeah, I think everything we talked about just feels super fundamental and foundational I think encouraging people to really know where they're not thriving and to be really honest and raw with themselves as to um, what they are, what God has for them, and where they're maybe not stewarding or operating fully right with the knowledge they have in those places, I think can be really helpful. It's kind of like going on a trip without a destination, right? Like you're just kind of wandering. And I feel like this stuff is so beautiful and so wonderful to incorporate in our lives. But if we don't actually have a picture of what we're trying to achieve in the process, I feel like we kind of just get tossed around. And so while this stuff is all wonderful and the nutrition and focusing on that, I think if we don't really know where we're trying to go with it, then it can just get really muddied.
I think that's so good to talk about purpose and be aware. And I love this conversation, how you've incorporated for us as the parent, but also for our children. And I will link to one other episode as well with Dr. Charles Fay, where he talks about raising emotionally healthy and mentally healthy children. He wrote a book with Dr. Amen. And in the episode, he just talked about the instilling purpose in our children and talking about that because God does have a purpose for them as well. And so I love how you're bringing all of this back as you've done so well, shining your faith throughout this conversation. But Emily, you know, we are called the Savvy Sauce because savvy is synonymous with practical knowledge. And so as my final question for you today, what is your Savvy Sauce?
Yeah, I knew this question was coming. And honestly, I was like, how do I pick just one? So I think this is what I'm going to say. Discipline equals freedom. And I have just found for me that kind of that savvy sauce, and it may change, that discipline may change over a period of time. But if I can get real honest with what I need to be disciplined in the moment, it gives me so much freedom for the rest of my day. And so being disciplined it used to feel constraining, and now it actually feels like such, I don't have to think about, right? Decision fatigue is a real thing. And so if I can just be disciplined, there's so much freedom that happens in my day with that.
Wow. Oh, I love that so much. And I love how self-control, I think of self-discipline as a fruit of the Spirit. And that's what I've experienced. You've cultivated that fruit in your life, and we've gotten to experience the good, sweet fruit in this conversation and the abundant life that you're living in, the overflow. So thank you for walking this journey well, stewarding all of this well, and sharing so generously with each of us. You are just a delight to spend time with. So thank you for being my guest.
Yes, thank you. Oh my goodness, you're such kind words.
One more thing before you go. Have you heard the term gospel before? It simply means good news, and I want to share the best news with you. But it starts with the bad news. Every single one of us were born sinners, but Christ desires to rescue us from our sin, which is something we cannot do for ourselves. This means there is absolutely no chance we can make it to heaven on our own. So for you and for me, it means we deserve death, and we can never pay back the sacrifice we owe to be saved. We need a Savior. But God loved us so much, He made a way for His only Son to willingly die in our place as the perfect substitute. This gives us hope of life forever in right relationship with Him. That is good news. Jesus lived the perfect life we could never live and died in our place for our sin. This was God's plan to make a way to reconcile with us so that God can look at us and see Jesus. We can be covered and justified through the work Jesus finished if we choose to receive what He has done for us. Romans 10:9 says that if you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you will be saved. So would you pray with me now? Heavenly Father, Thank you for sending Jesus to take our place. I pray someone today, right now, is touched and chooses to turn their life over to you. Will you clearly guide them and help them take their next step in faith to declare you as Lord of their life? We trust you to work and change lives now for eternity. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. If you prayed that prayer, you are declaring Him for me, so me for Him. You get the opportunity to live your life for Him. And at this podcast, we're called the Savvy Sauce for a reason. We want to give you practical tools to implement the knowledge you have learned. So you ready to get started? First, tell someone. Say it out loud. Get a Bible. The first day I made this decision, my parents took me to Barnes & Noble and let me choose my own Bible. I selected the Quest NIV Bible and I love it. You can start by reading the book of John. Also, get connected locally, which just means tell someone who's a part of a church in your community that you made a decision to follow Christ. I'm assuming they will be thrilled to talk with you about further steps, such as going to church and getting connected to other believers to encourage you. We want to celebrate with you too, so feel free to leave a comment for us here if you did make a decision to follow Christ. We also have show notes included where you can read scripture that describes this process. And finally, be encouraged. Luke 15:10 says, "In the same way, I tell you, there is rejoicing in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." The heavens are praising with you for your decision today. And if you've already received this good news, I pray you have someone to share it with. You are loved, and I look forward to meeting you here next time.